Who was Julius Caesar? More than 2,000 years ago, a 25-year-old man named from Rome was traveling by boat to the Greek island of Rhodes. He was going to study public speaking there. Suddenly, another ship appeared, a ship full of pirates. They were from Cilicia, what is now southern Turkey. Cilician pirates were feared throughout the ancient world. They were known to hijack large trading ships, steal the cargo, and sell the passengers into slavery. But these pirates were not interested in making a slave of the young man from Rome. He was too important for that. He came from a famous family and was known for his bravery in battle. The Romans would pay a high ransom for his return. The young man knew this. So when the pirates were set to demand 20 talents for his freedom, he laughed in their faces. A man of his fame was surely worth 50 talents. That would be more than 30 million in today's money. Messengers were sent ashore with the pirates' ransom demands. While back aboard the pirate ship, the young man did not act worried at all. He joined in the pirates' exercises and games. If the pirates were too loud when he wanted to sleep, he sent his servant to tell them to quiet down. Sometimes he made his captors listen to him recite poems and speeches he had written. If they acted bored, he called them stupid and threatened to have them killed the first chance he got. The pirates thought, what a joke. What could one prisoner do to a whole gang of pirates? After more than a month, the ransom finally arrived and the young man was set free. As soon as he got back on dry land, he raised a fleet of warships and returned to punish the pirates. The pirate ship was right where it had been. With little trouble, he captured the entire group and imprisoned them in a nearby Roman town. But was this enough to satisfy the young man's desire for revenge? No. He took each and every one of the pirates and had them killed. No one messed with this man known as Julius Caesar. Those who did lived to regret it. If they were lucky enough to escape with their lives, Over his lifetime, Julius Caesar doubled the size of the Roman Republic. He ruled over it single-handedly as dictator for life, the first man to do so in nearly 500 years. Julius Caesar changed Rome and the world forever. Julius Caesar was born in Rome in the year 100 BC. As a boy, he was tall and slender, with a full round face, dark hair, and intense black eyes. Julius Caesar was named after his father. His mother's name was Aurelia, and his two older sisters were both named Julia. How confusing. His family lived in Subura, a poor neighborhood of crowded apartment buildings. Many former slaves and foreigners lived there. Caesar's family was not rich or powerful, but they were patricians. This meant they were Romans' noble blood. They traced their roots back hundreds of years. Caesar's family said they were descended directly from Venus, the Roman goddess of love and beauty. No one in Caesar's family had done anything very important in many years. As his parents' only son, much was expected of young Caesar. His father taught him to fight with the Roman warriors' weapons of choice, a long spear, a short sword, and a shield. Caesar learned to swim in the Tiber River and to ride horses on the field of Mars. He wasn't the biggest or strongest boy, but he worked hard. He was such a good horseman, he could ride with his arms behind his back without a saddle. At home, Caesar learned basic reading, writing, and math skills from his mother and a private tutor, a slave from Greece. When Caesar grew older, he learned Greek. He also read and wrote poetry and perfected his skill at oratory, speaking before crowds. Being a good orator was extremely important for anyone who wanted to be a leader. If you could speak powerfully, people could be persuaded to vote for the causes you believed in. When he was a young man, Caesar went to observe the Roman Senate debate, vote on laws, and go about the business of running the republic. Years later, Caesar would give his own speeches to the Senate, but for now, He simply watched. In the Republic, only two groups of citizens were allowed to vote: citizens of Rome and the lucky few outside Rome who were granted citizenship. They had to travel all the way to the capital to cast a vote. Most people in other cities held very little power. When Caesar was 9, the cities surrounding Rome rebelled and went to war. The Roman Senate chose Caesar's uncle, Marius, to put down the rebellion. Romans loved Marius. His armies had once saved the city from an invasion. Marius was born a poor man, but he had risen to power. He was elected one of the consuls 7 times. When Caesar's aunt, who was also named Julia, and Marius wed, the family felt renewed pride. Their family name might once again be connected to greatness. Marius, however, was unable to put down the rebellion, so the wealthy men of the Senate picked a new general to lead the troops. They chose a man with piercing gray eyes named Sulla. He was not as popular as Marius was with the people of Rome, but he did succeed in putting down the rebellion. Now, Sulla was promoted to lead armies in the east, where war was breaking out in another corner of the Republic. Sulla's promotion made Marius very unhappy. Marius wanted to be the top general. He was the man the Romans adored, especially the poorer citizens of Rome. Sulla fought only to please the wealthy men in the Senate. Rome became a city divided, some behind Sulla, some behind Marius. Sulla wanted to make the Senate more powerful. Marius wanted more power for the popular assembly and for Rome's poorer citizens. His troops, however, were no match for Sulla and his army when they returned to Rome. Sulla's army burned down buildings and killed many people. Sulla was a Roman general. A Roman had never marched on Rome. There was nothing Marius could do but flee the city. Sulla traveled east again with his troops, but Marius was not ready to give up the fight. He teamed up with a man named Cinna. They returned to Rome with their own army and began killing Sulla's supporters. Some victims had their heads chopped off and stuck to the end of spears. They were displayed in the Forum for all of Rome to see. Marius and Cinna became consuls together. Now they ruled the city. Caesar had grown up in Subura, not in the hills above the city where the wealthy lived. He understood why his poor neighbors were frustrated with the Senate. The rich did not understand or care about their problems. When Marius died, Caesar sided with Cinna. Around this time, Caesar's father also died suddenly. Now, at 16, Caesar was head of the household, and he needed a job. Cinna appointed him to become the high priest of Jupiter. The god Jupiter was the protector of Rome. Being the god's high priest was an important job indeed. Caesar had to marry a girl of noble birth, so Cinna arranged for him to marry his own daughter, Cornelia. As the high priest of Jupiter, Caesar's hair had to be cut with a bronze knife. No other kind was acceptable. Then the hair had to be buried. Caesar also wore a pointy hat made of fur. And the feet of his bed had to be covered in mud. Of course they did. There were more rules, 3 of which really upset Caesar. He was forbidden from riding horses. He could not be a soldier, and he could not leave the city for more than 3 nights at a time. Caesar needed more than a fur hat to bring honor to his family. It was a difficult time for a man to make a name for himself in Rome. Cinna had grown mad with power. Wealthy citizens were being murdered by angry mobs. Word came that Sulla and his forces were returning to Rome, and Cinna led his troops to meet the enemy. Cinna's troops realized they were no match for Sulla's army, so what did they do? They murdered their own commander. But Cinna's death wasn't enough to satisfy Sulla. Once more, he marched on Rome. For the 3rd time in 6 years, the city was ablaze with Romans fighting Romans. In troubled times such as these, the Senate sometimes elected 1 consul instead of 2. This man was called a dictator, and he held all the power. They had not elected a dictator in nearly 100 years, but now they did. Sulla won the job easily. Sulla had always sided with the rich. He immediately extended the powers of the Senate and limited those of the popular assembly. He began clearing the city of his enemies. A list of names was posted in the forum. Anyone who killed a man on the list could keep some of that man's property. The rest went to the government. So thousands were murdered. Naturally, Julius Caesar was on Sulla's list. After all, he was Marius' nephew and had married Cinna's daughter. Sulla ordered Caesar to divorce his wife immediately. When Caesar refused, Sulla became furious. No one told the dictator no. Sulla stripped Caesar of his job and his money. Fearing for his life, 19-year-old Caesar escaped to the mountains outside Rome. With Sulla's men hot on his trail, he changed locations every night. Back in Rome, his family pleaded for his life, and eventually, Sulla relented. Caesar was happy to come home, but he knew at any moment his life could be at risk again. So he became a soldier and left Rome. He could not return for years. Caesar's first post was in Asia, in what is now Western Turkey. He was assistant to the Roman governor. Before Rome had conquered the area, it had been ruled by a king named Mithridates. Some of Mithridates' allies were holed up in an island, refusing to surrender to Rome. Caesar's boss needed ships, and quickly, to reach the island and wipe out the enemy. Caesar got the ships from a nearby kingdom, and the battle was on. He fought with such bravery, he was awarded the Corona Civica, or civic crown. It was a simple wreath made of oak leaves. Soldiers were given the crown for risking their own life to save someone. When someone wearing the civic crown walked into a room, everyone, even powerful senators, stood to show their respect. Caesar was making a name for himself. Yet to rise to higher office and win honor for his family, Caesar knew he had to find a way to grab the public's attention and hold it. When news of Sulla's death in Rome reached Caesar, he must have been overjoyed. It had been 2 years now. Caesar could return to Rome and enter politics. He decided to become an advocate, which was a lot like being a lawyer. There was no such thing as a law degree in those times. Any educated man could act as an advocate. Trials were held at the forum, and many people showed up to watch. The better the advocate spoke, the more dramatic the trial, and the bigger the crowd. The first case Caesar took was for a group of people from the Roman province of Macedonia. They had traveled all the way to Rome to seek justice from their former governor. The Macedonians claimed he had profited from money they had paid in Roman taxes. This happened all the time in Rome's provinces, but the Macedonians still wanted their day in court. Being a good advocate wasn't just about what you said, it was also about how you said it. And Caesar's speech for the Macedonians was brilliant. He spoke passionately and vividly and really turned on the charm. Someone at the trial said that listening to Caesar speak was like seeing a portrait painted with words. Nearly everyone in the forum that day was impressed with Caesar, but the jury was made up entirely of wealthy senators. They ruled in favor of the former governor, not the Macedonians. Caesar had lost the trial. Nevertheless, he was doing what he had set out to do. Romans were not going to forget his name. He had a new reputation as a masterful advocate for the little people. This would serve him well in the future. Not long after the trial, Caesar and Cornelia welcomed their first daughter to the world. And guess what her name was? Julia. Soon, Caesar was on the move again. If he wanted the good life for his wife and daughter, he had to become an even better orator and soldier. So he set off for the Greek island of Rhodes to study with the great philosophers and orators of the day. It was on this journey that he was kidnapped by the pirates. But back in Asia, the rebel forces of King Mithridates were causing trouble again, so Caesar had to abandon his plan for Rhodes. Instead, Caesar rushed to help the Roman governor in Asia. In Caesar's judgment, the governor was not acting strong enough. So what did Caesar do? He took over the army and led them into battle himself, defeating the rebels. This was against the law. The governor was supposed to call the shots in his province. But Caesar didn't care. He'd do anything to bring glory to his family and to Rome. No one at home would ever cheer his name if he sat back and played by the rules. Caesar, now 27 years old, received word from Rome. He'd been elected to public office. It was time to return home once again. Caesar was elected pontifex. He was now an even more important priest than he'd been before. It was another step up the Roman ladder of success. Luckily, the rules for being a pontifex were not so strict, and Caesar could remain a soldier. A couple of years later, Caesar was elected to another post, a quaestor. This was a government official who did any number of things for the Republic. There was a quaestor in charge of Rome's water supply, for example. Caesar was probably thrilled to be assigned a post in faraway Spain. He had seen the eastern reaches of the Republic when he was a soldier in Asia. Now, as an important representative of Rome, he could journey west to the edge of the known world. Just as he was preparing to leave, tragedy struck when Caesar's wife died. The two had known each other since they were teenagers, and Caesar was brokenhearted. However, it did not stop him, and shortly after the funeral, he went to Spain. Caesar met with locals and listened to their problems. Acting as a judge to settle disputes and gaining a reputation as a fair man, he returned to Rome by land so he could stop in northern Italy. In the area, the people yearned for Roman citizenship in order to enjoy the many rights that came with it. Caesar said he would do what he could to help. He was making friends and allies all over the Republic now. Caesar could find political opportunity almost anywhere. Just before Cornelia had died, his beloved Aunt Julia passed away. Caesar arranged her funeral and gave a speech honoring her. Rome's ruling class still considered Aunt Julia's husband, Caesar's uncle Marius, to be a bloodthirsty murderer. So it would have been smart for Caesar to keep the funeral private and quiet, but of course, Caesar had other ideas. The funeral was held at the Forum. Caesar knew that most Romans still loved Marius, so Caesar led a long parade of people carrying large paintings of his aunt and uncle. Displaying pictures of Marius had been banned by Sulla 15 years before. Now, veterans of Marius's army wept openly at seeing his face after so many years. Caesar gave a powerful speech, as much about his ancestors as it was about his Aunt Julia. He told the crowd, "The family of my Aunt Julia is descended from kings on her mother's side, and through her father from the gods themselves. My family therefore holds the sanctity of kings who rule among men and of gods who rule over kings." This was a smart way for Caesar to remind people of his noble background. Now, when they thought of Caesar, they'd think of kings and gods, and of Marius, beloved savior of Rome. That day, chants of Caesar and Marius echoed through Rome. After his post in Spain, Caesar held a number of jobs in Rome. One was organizing public festivals and games. Here was another opportunity for Caesar to make his name known among the Romans. He borrowed tons of money to create lavish spectacles. For one event, Caesar brought together more than 600 of the Republic's best gladiators. Memories of Spartacus's rebellion were still fresh. Some feared that Caesar was trying to start another rebellion, but Caesar had other plans. He dressed the gladiators in pure silver. The crowds were dazzled as the sun reflected off so much shiny armor. Julius Caesar could really put on a show. Soon, Caesar's name was on everyone's tongue. From one end of the Republic to the other, he had made friends and gained their support. He was well on his way to the very top of Roman politics. 10 years after being elected pontifex, Caesar ran for Pontifex Maximus, the highest priesthood in Rome. He was up against two older and more experienced men. Already deep in debt from running the games, Caesar borrowed more money to get elected. Crassus was among Caesar's most generous supporters. He was one of the richest men in Rome. Caesar was risking everything. If he lost, he had never gained the power and influence necessary to make the money back. He would have to flee the city with angry creditors on his tail. As he left home the day of the big vote, Caesar told his mother he'd return either as Pontifex Maximus or as a fugitive. But of course, the people's choice was Julius Caesar. The new position came with a new house. After 37 years in Sabura, Caesar moved his family into their beautiful new home in the center of town. 2 years later, the Senate appointed Caesar to be governor of Spain. As governor, Caesar could collect taxes and steal from rebellious cities. Caesar still owed a lot of money. In Spain, Caesar's army crushed local tribes who had been troublesome to Rome. He also got the province's finances in order, taking some silver for himself while he was at it. Soon, Caesar had almost enough money to repay his loans. But even better for the Republic, he had brought peace to Spain for the first time in decades. Now certainly was the moment for Caesar to reach for even more power, so he ran for consul. When the votes were counted, Caesar came in first, and a man named Bibulus came in second. They became co-consuls for the year 59 BC. Bibulus did not share Caesar's beliefs. He and his allies in the Senate did everything they could to keep Caesar from succeeding. Caesar needed powerful friends of his own. He always counted on Crassus. Now he looked to a popular general named Pompey. Crassus and Pompey did not like each other, but Caesar thought all three men could help one another out. They formed a secret alliance. To seal this alliance, Caesar gave his daughter in marriage to Pompey. Recently, Pompey's army had defeated pirates and conquered new lands in the Middle East. This made Rome very rich. Pompey wanted to reward some of his hardworking troops with land. For years, the Senate refused to grant his wish. But now as consul, Caesar came up with a law that gave land to some soldiers as well as Rome's urban poor. Most said it was a good and fair plan. With taxes from Rome's newest territories, it wouldn't cost the Republic a cent. But Caesar's enemies in the Senate, as well as his co-consul Bibulus, refused to hold a vote. Caesar took it to the people. In front of a large crowd, Pompey and Crassus spoke in favor of the law. The people roared their approval. Bibulus was furious at the thought of his own power slipping away. Caesar begged Bibulus to listen to the crowd and support the law. People were angry at Bibulus. They threw things at him. Someone dumped a basket of animal poop on his head, and a mob chased him back to his house. Bibulus hid there, humiliated for the rest of the year. Now Caesar was the only consul in power. After their year in office, consuls were given a new job by the Senate. Pompey and Crassus helped secure Caesar a post as governor of 3 of Rome's northern provinces. For 5 years, he would rule over a territory that stretched from southern France to Macedonia. This was great news for Caesar. As governor, he could once again collect taxes and become rich. But his sights were set higher, beyond his province's borders, to a vast unconquered land called Gaul. The warlike tribes of Gaul and their fearsome neighbors, the Germans, frightened the Romans. If Caesar brought Gaul under Rome's control, he'd be a hero like Alexander the Great. In 58 BC, Caesar left home again and traveled north. He was 41 years old. He would not return to Rome until after his 50th birthday. Gaul encompassed modern-day France, Belgium, northern Italy, and parts of Switzerland, Holland, and Germany. 2 areas of Gaul had been conquered and settled into 2 Roman provinces before Caesar was born. It was from these lands that Caesar would raise armies to conquer the rest of Gaul. The fighting in Gaul began with a tribe from the Swiss Alps. They wanted to move from the mountains to the Atlantic coast, where there was more land for farming. They also wished to be far away from their violent German neighbors. The tribe had planned this move for years. Unfortunately, they had to cross the Rhone River into Roman territory to get what they wanted. Caesar rushed with his army to confront the tribe in the town of Geneva. Tribal ambassadors insisted they meant no harm to Rome. They only wanted safe passage to the coast. But Caesar wasn't taking any chances. 300,000 Gauls were on the move, and they had burned their villages behind them, so no one could change their mind and move back home. Caesar was tricky. He told the ambassadors he would consider their request. He told them to return in 2 weeks for his answer. All this was a lie. Once they left, Caesar destroyed the bridge across the river. Then he built a 16-foot wall that followed the river for 19 miles. When the tribe returned, they were shocked to find their route blocked. Those who tried to cross on foot or by boat were easy targets for Roman archers. The survivors had no choice but to go back to their burned-out homeland in the mountains. As word of this defeat spread, some tribes in Gaul pledged loyalty to Caesar. Others fought against him, but one by one the tribes fell. Caesar inspired fierce loyalty in his troops. He fought bravely alongside them in battle. He called each man comrade rather than soldier, and knew many by name. Roman soldiers were well equipped in battle. They wore flexible chainmail suits made of bronze or iron. They wore sturdy leather sandals with studs on the soles to prevent wear and tear during long marches. They had many weapons. A 6-foot-long spear called a pilum, the gladius or short sword, was double-edged, very sharp, and just under 2 feet long. It was used for quick stabs and slashes at close range. A lightweight shield measured up to 4 feet tall and about 2 feet across. It curved at the sides for better protection and had a metal boss or umbo in its center that was perfect for punching an opponent in hand-to-hand combat. Caesar's troops were often outnumbered, but their skills won out. If an enemy took refuge inside walled cities, Caesar's men built movable siege towers that could be wheeled right up to the city walls. Once, Caesar built a bridge across the Rhine River just to punish a Germanic tribe. The Germans had been raiding a tribe on the Gaulish side of the river, a tribe that was loyal to Rome. Caesar ordered his men to build a bridge across the river. At the time, it was the longest bridge in the world, and it was built in just 10 days. The Roman troops crossed the Rhine and taught the Germans never to mess with a friend of Rome. After crossing the bridge back into Gaul, Caesar ordered it to be torn down. He'd proven his point. As his first 5-year term as governor drew to a close, Caesar returned to northern Italy to meet with Crassus and Pompey. Caesar wanted to stay in Gaul for another 5 years. His allies agreed to get themselves elected as co-consuls to make it happen. Back in Gaul, Caesar met his most capable foe in 53 BC. His name was Vercingetorix, and he united dozens of Gaulish tribes to fight the Romans. He convinced the Gauls to burn their towns and crops and flee to walled cities for protection. Vercingetorix planned to starve Caesar's army into surrendering. The plan caught the Romans by surprise, but Caesar would never give up. Eventually, Caesar's troop captured Vercingetorix. I know I'm saying it wrong, but whatever. And his men in Alesia. Quickly, Caesar surrounded the walled city with another wall. He booby-trapped the grounds between the two walls by digging pits and burying sharp stakes in the dirt. Roman archers stood guard all along Caesar's wall. The people of Alesia were trapped in their city. They began to starve. More tribesmen were on their way to help Vercingetorix. To guard against them, Caesar built a second wall around the first one he had built. When the Gaulish reinforcements arrived, the Romans were ready. The final battle was fierce. The Romans repelled attacks from both directions. Caesar even lost his sword. But in the end, Vercingetorix surrendered. Caesar sold everyone into slavery and arrested their leader, who was thrown in prison in Rome. More battles would be fought, but the siege of Alesia was the Gauls' last real chance to hold back Caesar. From then on, he could not be stopped. By 50 BC, Caesar had conquered all of Gaul. After 10 years in Gaul, it was time to return home. Caesar, now one of the richest and most popular men in Rome, hoped to rule again as consul. But he still had many enemies. Some wanted to put him on trial for things he'd done as consul. The Senate said word to Caesar, ordering him to dismiss his army before returning home. To make matters worse, Caesar no longer had his alliance to help him. Crassus was dead. Pompey had grown jealous of Caesar's popularity, and Pompey's wife, Caesar's daughter Julia, had just died in childbirth. Both Caesar and Pompey were grief-stricken, but their relationship did not grow stronger from this loss. When Caesar offered Pompey another chance to join their families in marriage, he refused. Instead, he married the daughter of one of Caesar's rivals. Unsure of his next move, Caesar set up camp with his troops along the Rubicon, the stream that separates Italy from Gaul. When he was ordered again to abandon his troops, Caesar told the Senate he would gladly comply if Pompey did the same. Pompey had large armies of his own, but they were in faraway Spain. Caesar had a difficult choice to make. If he defied the Senate and kept his army, he would become an enemy of the state. If he obeyed, he knew he'd be arrested for other crimes the moment he entered Rome without protection. And if he took too long to decide, Pompey could summon his troops from Spain in time to attack Caesar. In the end, Caesar, ever the daring soldier, chose to march. On the morning of January 10th, 49 BC, he led the troops across the Rubicon, crying out, "The die is cast!" Taken by surprise, Pompey and his supporters in the Senate fled south from Rome. He was able to gather some troops and supplies along the way, but his large army was still hundreds of miles away in Spain. Caesar followed close behind Pompey. Cities threw open their gates to welcome their conquering hero, and Caesar added more troops. Even so, Caesar wanted to avoid another civil war. He sent messengers to Pompey requesting a meeting. Pompey, however, refused to meet. Pompey escaped to Greece and began raising an army to take on Caesar and his men. Caesar returned to Rome, where he seized gold and silver from the treasury to fund the war. In the fall, almost 1 year after crossing the Rubicon, Caesar led his army to Greece. Unfortunately, he discovered he was greatly outnumbered. For 8 months, Pompey's army blocked the coastline, trying to defeat Caesar's exhausted troops by starvation. Against all odds, Caesar finally defeated Pompey's army. Pompey disguised himself as a peasant and fled, but Caesar followed him all the way to Alexandria in Egypt. Egypt, too, was in the middle of its own civil war. Ptolemy the 13th, the teenage king, was in a power struggle with his sister, 21-year-old Queen Cleopatra. Ptolemy and his advisors had kicked Cleopatra out of the royal palace. She was raising an army of her own to fight for the throne. Ptolemy needed Caesar's support in his fight against Cleopatra. He had heard of Caesar's victory over Pompey and wanted to get on the winner's good side. So, his advisors presented Caesar with a welcome gift upon his arrival, a woven basket containing Pompey's severed head. Julius Caesar's bitter rival, once his close ally and son-in-law, was dead. Caesar was not pleased by the king's gruesome offering. He was angry. Caesar stormed Ptolemy's palace, trapping the king. This angered the residents of Alexandria. Egypt was independent. How dare a Roman general hold their leader prisoner inside his own palace? Deadly riots broke out, but Caesar would not leave until Egypt's civil war had ended. A kingdom as wealthy and powerful as Egypt could be dangerous to Rome if it remained unstable. Caesar wished to settle the king and queen's differences quickly. He sent for Cleopatra, but Ptolemy's guards stopped her from meeting the Roman ruler. So, one night, Cleopatra devised a plan. She had a servant deliver her to Caesar's room, wrapped in a rug. Caesar was so impressed with her cleverness, some say he fell in love with her immediately. Many Egyptians loved Cleopatra too. Caesar realized that Cleopatra was the better choice to rule the kingdom. Caesar summoned Ptolemy. The young king was surprised to find his sister sitting next to Caesar, and in his own palace. When he realized that Caesar was taking Cleopatra's side, he ran to the crowd gathered outside, threw off his crown, and cried. Caesar assured the Egyptians that his intentions were pure. All he wanted was peace for Egypt. He proposed that brother and sister rule together. Meanwhile, Ptolemy's troops were closing in. The Egyptian navy attacked Caesar's ships in the harbor. City residents watched the dramatic naval battles from the rooftops. Egyptians from all over poured into Alexandria to fight the Romans. Caesar's troops fought from house to house in the city streets surrounding the palace. This is not the type of battle Caesar was used to fighting, but he held off the Egyptians. Eventually, ships loaded with soldiers from Caesar's army arrived on the Nile River. Egyptian forces moved to the same area of the Nile. In the battle that followed, Caesar was victorious and Ptolemy drowned. Caesar returned to Alexandria to name Cleopatra Queen of Egypt. Caesar had been in Egypt for months. He'd been at war for a decade. It was time for a vacation. So he and Cleopatra took a leisurely month-long cruise down the Nile. But even a vacation had a purpose for Caesar. 400 Roman ships sailed with him. They sent a clear message to the people of Egypt: mess with your queen and suffer at the hands of Caesar. Before Caesar left Egypt, Cleopatra gave birth to a baby boy, Caesar's only son. She named him Ptolemy the 15th, but the Egyptians called him Little Caesar or Caesarion. Caesar traveled through the Middle East on his way back to Rome, settling disputes, collecting payments, and putting down rebellions in the provinces along the way. After squashing one rebellion, he uttered a phrase that would become forever famous: Vendi, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Once back in Rome, Caesar would finally repay his troops for their years of loyal service. They were given handsome bonuses, and provided with land all around the Republic. Caesar also appointed some of his soldiers and tribal allies to the Senate. Lavish parades were organized for Caesar's homecoming. The Romans were amazed by the mountains of treasures and exotic animals from Caesar's conquests. No one in Rome had ever seen a giraffe before. His great enemy in Gaul, Vercingetorix, was taken out of jail and paraded through the streets with other prisoners of war before being executed. Following Roman tradition, a slave whispered into Caesar's ear during the celebrations. "Remember, you are mortal," he told the great ruler. Despite this, Caesar probably felt like a god after all he had accomplished. He declared himself dictator for 10 more years. Consuls would still be elected, but Caesar would always speak first in the Senate meetings, and his word was law. It seemed that nothing could stop Julius Caesar. The dictator left Rome one last time to defeat Pompey's remaining supporters in Spain. With the help of his grandnephew Octavius, he was successful. He held another celebration upon his return, but this parade did not impress Romans. Caesar's other wars had seemed justified. Now it seemed like he was just slaughtering fellow Romans. The Senate, probably terrified of him, gave Caesar a throne of solid gold. The month of Quintilis was officially renamed in his honor. Julius, or July, Caesar's birthday, was proclaimed a public holiday for all time, and he was named dictator for life. Julius Caesar once said, "The Republic is nothing, just a name without substance or form." It appeared now that the Roman Republic, after 500 years, was truly dying. The dictator did much good for the Republic. He put Romans to work digging ports and canals and made plans to build a grand library. He granted citizenship and all the rights that came with it to many living in the provinces. New colonies were established in far-flung reaches of the Republic, and Caesar sent 80,000 Romans to start new lives there. He also started a project to record all of Rome's laws in one place, a process that would take hundreds of years. But Caesar's love of power also made Romans nervous and fearful. He had coins minted in his image. He placed a statue of himself among statues of the gods. He put one of Cleopatra in the Temple of Venus. Some feared he would take Cleopatra as his queen and rule over Rome from Egypt as king. After all, he had taken to wearing the traditional purple toga of the ancient kings. In early 44 BC, a group of senators met in secret to discuss what to do about Caesar. They called themselves the Liberators. Marcus Brutus, A man whom Caesar had known since Brutus was a baby was among them. The liberators decided the only way to save the Republic was to murder its dictator. Early one morning, Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, awoke from a terrible nightmare. In it, she was holding her husband's lifeless body. It was March 15th, the Ides of March. Days earlier, Caesar had been warned by a fortune teller that something terrible would happen on this day. Caesar's wife begged him to stay home, but Caesar refused. As Caesar walked through the forum, he was approached by a man who worked for Brutus. The man had heard about the plan to murder Caesar. Afraid to speak aloud, the man slipped Caesar a scroll of paper explaining everything. But Caesar was in a hurry and merely put the scroll with some other papers he was carrying. Next, Caesar saw the fortune teller. He laughed and told her she'd been wrong. It was the Ides of March and he was alive and well. The fortune teller cautioned Caesar that the day was not over yet. Upon Caesar's arrival in the Senate hall, a group of men surrounded him. One senator, whose brother had been exiled by Caesar, asked him for a pardon. When Caesar refused, the man tugged on Caesar's toga, begging him for mercy. This was the signal. The first to stab Caesar was a senator named Casca. He was so nervous that he only grazed Caesar's neck. Caesar attacked with the only weapon he had, a pen, and stabbed it through Casca's arm. 21 more blows descended on Caesar, one knife after another. Could this really be how the great commander would die? Caesar fought for his life, wildly, until he saw Marcus Brutus, the boy he had known and mentored for so many years, raise his weapon to strike. "Even you, my child?" a shocked Julius Caesar said as the knife came down. Refusing to let his enemy see him die, Caesar pulled his toga over his head and collapsed dead on the Senate floor. He was 55 years old. Rome erupted into chaos. Fearing for their lives, Caesar's allies fled the city. After Caesar's death, the fight to control Rome raged for more than a decade. Caesar's heir, Octavius, defeated his uncle's enemies, ending the Republic and open debate and free elections forever. In its place rose the Roman Empire. At its height, it stretched from Scotland to Egypt, connecting the world as never before. Octavius became Rome's first emperor, changing his name to Caesar Augustus and ruling as supreme leader. For hundreds of years, Rome's emperors would also take the name Caesar. Later in history, German and Russian leaders took the name themselves, Kaiser and Tsar. Though the empire would eventually crumble, Julius Caesar's name remains eternal. The end.